Move out! Keep the pace! Tanks forward! Close the gap! Faster!
December 19, 1944. Verdun, France. 16 generals in a freezing room. 3 days earlier, Germany launched its largest counteroffensive since D-Day. The 101st Airborne is surrounded at Bastogne. Eisenhower asks, "When can you counterattack?" Montgomery says 1 week. Others say 10 days. Patton stands up. 3 divisions, 48 hours. The room goes silent. What Patton is proposing has never been attempted. Turning an entire army of 250,000 men 90 degrees through the worst blizzard in decades, disengaging from combat and attacking within 2 days. Eisenhower stares at him. Bradley thinks he's lost his mind. This is the story of the maneuver that military historians still call impossible, and what Eisenhower said when Patton actually did it. Patton's promise violated every principle of military logistics. Third Army wasn't positioned near the Ardennes. They were 140 miles south, heavily engaged against German forces in the Saar.
Advance, move out! GPSS!
The army consisted of 250,000 soldiers organized into multiple corps with over 130,000 vehicles including tanks, artillery, supply trucks, ambulances, and command vehicles. They were attacking eastward into Germany when Eisenhower summoned Patton to Verdun. The scale of what Patton proposed was staggering. Turning an entire field army 90 degrees while maintaining combat effectiveness had never been attempted in modern warfare. Every division, regiment, battalion, and company would need new orders. Artillery batteries positioned for eastward fire would need to displace, move up to 150 miles over winter roads, and establish new firing positions facing north. Tank units engaged with enemy forces would need to disengage without being pursued, turn around, and drive through blizzard conditions to new assembly areas. Supply lines running east would need complete reconfiguration to support northward operations. The weather made everything worse. December 1944 brought the worst winter conditions Europe had seen in 38 years.
Move out! Keep formations! Yes, sir! Push through the snow!
Temperatures plunged to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Snow fell continuously. Roads that were barely adequate in summer became ice-covered death traps. Visibility dropped to near zero during snow squalls. Vehicle engines froze overnight, requiring hours to restart. Soldiers who had been fighting in relatively dry conditions toward the Saar now faced full winter warfare. When Patton made his promise at Verdun, he wasn't bluffing. While other commanders slept the previous night, Patton's staff had worked preparing contingency plans. He had anticipated Eisenhower might need Third Army to respond to the German offensive. His operations officer had developed 3 attack plans, one with 3 divisions, one with 4, one with 6. Movement orders were drafted. Route reconnaissance had been conducted. Fuel requirements calculated, artillery displacement schedules prepared, but having plans and executing them were different matters. The 4th Armored Division would lead the attack, Patton's most experienced and aggressive formation. Behind them would come the 26th Infantry Division and 80th Infantry Division. These 3 divisions would have to disengage from current operations, travel between 75 and 150 miles depending on starting positions, and be ready to attack German forces defending approaches to Bastogne by December 22nd. Eisenhower studied Patton carefully during the Verdun meeting. The Supreme Commander knew Patton's strengths and weaknesses intimately. They had served together for decades. Eisenhower had protected Patton after the slapping incidents in Sicily. He valued Patton's aggressive instincts and tactical brilliance, but he also knew Patton's tendency toward overconfidence and his hatred of defensive operations or delays. The question was whether this was tactical genius or dangerous overreach. If Patton failed, if Third Army couldn't execute the turn, couldn't reach Bastogne in time, or arrived too disorganized to fight effectively, the consequences would be catastrophic. The 101st would be overrun. The German offensive might achieve breakthrough to the Meuse River. Allied strategy for the entire Western Front would unravel. Montgomery's cautious approach suddenly looked reasonable. Taking a week to properly organize forces, ensure adequate supplies, coordinate with air support, and plan methodical advance would guarantee success. Patton's approach risked everything on speed and audacity. Eisenhower made his decision. He authorized Patton's attack for December 22nd, but his words to Patton were measured. The enemy situation is deteriorating rapidly. I want you to drive northwest with strong forces to relieve Bastogne. Start the attack as soon as you can with what you have. We can't afford to wait. As the meeting broke up, Bradley pulled Patton aside. His message was blunt. George, you better deliver on this. Every general in this room heard you promise something most think is impossible. Patton's response was equally direct. I'll be in Bastogne by Christmas. December 19th, evening through December 22nd, dawn. What followed became case study in military command and staff excellence. While dramatic narratives focus on Patton's personality, the real story was organizational competence executed under impossible conditions. Movement orders went out immediately after the Verdun conference. Division commanders received written directives specifying routes, timing, assembly areas, and attack objectives. Corps headquarters coordinated with logistics officers to ensure fuel dumps were established along movement routes. Engineer battalions prepared to clear roads and maintain bridges. The 4th Armored Division, commanded by Major General Hugh Gaffey, began moving first. As 3rd Army's most experienced formation and designated spearhead for the relief, they had priority on roads and fuel. Combat Command A and Combat Command B, the division's 2 main maneuver elements, started their approach marches on the night of December 19th, 20. Road conditions were nightmarish. Ice covered every surface. Snow reduced visibility to dozens of meters during squalls. Vehicles slid off roads into ditches. Convoy spacing, normally measured in meters, expanded to hundreds of meters as drivers crept forward, trying to maintain control. What should have been 8-hour movements stretched to 14 or 16 hours. The 26th Infantry Division, commanded by Major General Willard Paul, faced even worse conditions. Their starting positions were further from Bastogne than 4th Armored's. The division's regiments moved in separate columns to avoid creating massive traffic jams. Soldiers rode in open trucks through sub-zero temperatures. Frostbite became immediate concern. Units arriving at assembly areas needed time for soldiers to warm up before they could effectively fight. The 80th Infantry Division under Major General Horace McBride encountered similar challenges. This division had been heavily engaged in combat before receiving movement orders. They had to disengage from enemy contact, reorganize, and begin approach march, all while German forces attempted to exploit the withdrawal. McBride's regiments conducted fighting withdrawals, established rear guards, then moved north in stages. Behind the combat divisions came the support tail essential for sustained operations. Artillery battalions, the heavy firepower that would support the attack, moved separately from infantry they would support. Each artillery battery had to calculate new firing data for different terrain and different targets. Fire direction centers needed time to establish communications with forward observers. Ammunition trucks had to navigate the same icy roads while hauling tons of shells. Supply convoys stretched for miles. Fuel trucks carried the gasoline and diesel that would keep tanks, trucks, and generators running. Ammunition trucks hauled artillery shells, small arms rounds, and tank ammunition. Medical companies brought ambulances and surgical teams. Maintenance companies transported mechanics and spare parts. Signal companies carried radios and wire for communications. Patton personally monitored every phase of the movement. His headquarters staff maintained hour-by-hour status reports on each division's progress. When bottlenecks developed, military police were dispatched to direct traffic. When units fell behind schedule, Patton called commanders personally to demand faster movement. His chief of staff later recalled that Patton slept perhaps 4 hours total during those 72 hours. By December 21st, all 3 divisions were approaching their assembly areas south of Bastogne. They had covered distances ranging from 75 to 150 miles in winter conditions that should have made such movement impossible. Vehicle losses from mechanical failure and weather-related accidents were significant but not crippling. Unit cohesion had been maintained. Soldiers were exhausted and cold but ready to fight. The German command watching this movement was stunned. Their intelligence had tracked 3rd Army's positions in the Saar. They knew American forces were heavily engaged there. The appearance of entire divisions on a completely different front 140 miles away, within 72 hours of the Ardennes offensive beginning, seemed impossible. German commanders had calculated that American response would take at least a week, time enough for German forces to capture Bastogne and continue advancing toward the Meuse. On December 22nd at 600 hours, exactly 48 hours after Patton's promise at Verdun, the 4th Armored Division attacked north toward Bastogne. Behind them, the 26th and 80th Infantry Divisions were deploying for coordinated assault. Patton had delivered exactly what he promised, exactly when he promised it. While Patton executed his maneuver, Eisenhower managed the broader crisis threatening to destroy Allied strategy for ending the war. The Supreme Commander's perspective was fundamentally different from Patton's tactical focus. Eisenhower commanded over 3 million soldiers across multiple army groups spanning from the Netherlands to Switzerland. Every decision affected the entire strategic situation. The German Ardennes offensive had achieved complete surprise. Over 200,000 German troops, supported by nearly 1,000 tanks, had smashed into positions held by 4 inexperienced or depleted American divisions. Within 48 hours, German spearheads had penetrated 30 miles into Allied lines, creating a massive bulge in the front. American command and control had fractured. Communications were disrupted. Units were scattered and isolated. Nobody knew the full extent of German penetration or objectives. Eisenhower's first challenge was preventing panic. Some staff officers advocated immediate withdrawal to more defensible lines. Others wanted to concentrate all available forces for counteroffensive. Eisenhower insisted on holding critical road junctions while organizing methodical response. His December 19th meeting at Verdun was designed to impose order on chaos and establish coordinated plan. When Patton made his 48-hour promise, Eisenhower had to weigh multiple factors. First was military feasibility. Could Third Army actually execute such maneuver? Eisenhower had seen Patton's capabilities firsthand in Sicily and France. He knew Patton's staff was exceptionally competent, and that Third Army had developed into perhaps the most aggressive and effective American formation in Europe. But this operation exceeded anything previously attempted. Second was strategic necessity. The 101st Airborne at Bastogne was critical. If German forces captured the town and its road network, they would have clear routes to the Meuse River and potentially to Antwerp. Losing Bastogne might mean losing the battle. Eisenhower needed American relief to reach Bastogne before German forces could overwhelm the garrison. Third was political consideration. Relations between American and British commanders were strained. Montgomery had been given temporary command of American forces north of the German penetration, a decision that infuriated American generals. If Montgomery alone saved the situation through methodical approach, while Patton failed through reckless aggression, it would validate British arguments about American command competence. Eisenhower needed American forces to demonstrate they could respond effectively to crisis. Fourth was resource allocation. Committing Third Army to Bastogne relief meant abandoning operations in the Saar that had been achieving success. German forces that would have faced Third Army pressure in the south could now redeploy or reinforce elsewhere. The entire operational balance across the Western Front would shift. Eisenhower authorized Patton's operation, knowing it was enormous gamble. If Third Army couldn't execute the turn successfully, if they arrived at Bastogne too disorganized to fight effectively, or if German forces defeated them in detail during the approach march, the consequences would be catastrophic. Eisenhower would bear responsibility for that failure. His chief of staff, Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, expressed concerns about the risks. Eisenhower's response captured his command philosophy. Patton is capable of executing this operation if anyone is. We must accept the risk because the alternative, losing Bastogne and allowing the German offensive to achieve breakthrough, is unacceptable. Throughout December 20 to 21, Eisenhower monitored Third Army's progress through staff reports. The movement was progressing on schedule despite weather conditions. Units were maintaining cohesion. The logistics system was functioning. But Eisenhower knew the real test would come when Patton's forces encountered German defensive positions south of Bastogne. German forces defending the approaches were formidable. Multiple divisions occupied prepared positions. They understood that preventing American relief of Bastogne was essential to the entire offensive's success. They would fight desperately to stop Patton's advance. When December 22nd arrived and reports confirmed Third Army had begun attacking on schedule, Eisenhower's reaction was measured. He sent congratulations to Patton for executing the deployment successfully, but he emphasized that reaching Bastogne was only first objective. Third Army would need to maintain offensive pressure, defeat German counterattacks, and open supply routes into the besieged town. Eisenhower also began planning for the broader counteroffensive that would eliminate the entire German Bulge. Montgomery's forces would attack from the north. Patton's forces would drive from the south. Together they would encircle and destroy German forces that had penetrated Allied lines. But all of that depended on Patton successfully relieving Bastogne first. December 22, 26, 1944. Patton's attack north toward Bastogne encountered exactly the resistance German commanders had prepared. The 4th Armored Division led the assault up the N4 highway from Ardennes toward Bastogne, roughly 25 miles of snow-covered road defended by determined German forces, who understood that holding this route meant holding Bastogne. Combat Command A under Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams took the lead. Abrams was aggressive tank commander who had earned reputation for bold tactics and relentless pressure. His task force consisted of Sherman tanks, armored infantry and half-tracks, tank destroyers, and supporting artillery. They attacked up the highway in armored columns, engaging German positions at towns and road junctions. The fighting was immediate and intense. German forces had established defensive positions at every village along the route. Panzerfaust anti-tank teams waited in buildings. Artillery was pre-registered on road junctions. Machine gun nests covered approaches. Each village became miniature battle requiring infantry to clear buildings, while tanks provided fire support. Weather continued to hamper operations. Snow fell continuously, reducing visibility. Roads were ice-covered, making vehicle maneuver difficult. Air support, which had been decisive in earlier Third Army operations, was grounded by clouds and snow. The advance became grinding infantry armor battle without the overwhelming firepower advantages that American forces normally enjoyed. Progress was measured in hundreds of meters per hour. The 4th Armored Division's after-action reports documented steady advance, but at pace far slower than Patton wanted. German counterattacks struck American columns repeatedly. Small unit actions erupted constantly as German infantry attempted to infiltrate around advancing American positions. Behind 4th Armored, the 26th and 80th Infantry Divisions deployed into attack formations. Their mission was to broaden the corridor to Bastogne, protect 4th Armored's flanks, and prevent German forces from cutting the supply route once it was opened. The infantry divisions advanced through the same brutal conditions: cold, snow, limited visibility, and determined enemy resistance. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne situation was deteriorating. By December 22nd, the garrison had been surrounded for 3 days. Ammunition was being rationed. Medical supplies were critically low. Food was scarce. The clear weather on December 23rd allowed supply drops which temporarily eased the crisis. But everyone in Bastogne knew their survival depended on relief arriving before supplies ran out again, or German forces mounted assault that overwhelmed the defenses. Patton monitored the battle from his headquarters, receiving updates every few hours. The 4th Armored's progress wasn't as fast as he wanted, but it was steady. Units were maintaining pressure. German defensive positions were being reduced systematically, but time was running short. Bastogne couldn't hold indefinitely. On December 26th, the breakthrough came. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams organized task force around Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion and elements of the 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion. Their objective was to drive straight up the road from Ardennes to Bastogne, approximately 4 miles through whatever German resistance they encountered. The attack would be direct assault depending on speed and shock to break through before German forces could organize effective response. At 1500 hours, Abrams's task force attacked. Sherman tanks and armored infantry half-tracks charged up the road in column formation. German forces responded with anti-tank fire and small arms. American tanks fired on the move, suppressing German positions. The column maintained momentum, crashing through roadblocks and overwhelming defensive positions through sheer aggression. At 1650 hours, Lieutenant Charles Bogus, commanding the lead tank, broke through to Bastogne's perimeter. Soldiers of the 101st Airborne's 326th Engineer Battalion recognized American tanks approaching from the south. The siege was broken. Within hours, supply convoys were entering Bastogne. Medical evacuation began. Fresh ammunition arrived. The relief had succeeded. When confirmation reached Eisenhower that Third Army had broken through to Bastogne, his response combined satisfaction with recognition of what still needed to be accomplished. He sent message to Patton. The success of your attack toward Bastogne is having great significance. It has been carried out with characteristic dash and determination. The relief of Bastogne on December 26, 1944, vindicated Patton's 48-hour promise and Eisenhower's decision to authorize the operation. But the broader Battle of the Bulge continued for 3 more weeks. Relieving Bastogne was critical first step. Eliminating the entire German penetration was the ultimate objective. Eisenhower's public statements about Patton's achievement were measured and professional. In messages to combined chiefs of staff and press releases, he praised Third Army's rapid response and successful relief operation. But his private assessment to close associates was more revealing about his true thoughts on what Patton had accomplished. To his chief of staff, Walter Bedell Smith, Eisenhower acknowledged that Patton's operation had been better and faster than I had any right to expect given the conditions. This was significant admission from a commander known for understated expression. Eisenhower recognized that executing 90-degree turn of entire field army through winter conditions while maintaining combat effectiveness was unprecedented achievement. In communications with Army Chief of Staff George Marshall, Eisenhower emphasized the broader significance. Patton's response to the Ardennes crisis demonstrated that American forces are capable of rapid, decisive action under the most difficult circumstances. This will serve us well as we prepare for final campaigns into Germany, but Eisenhower also noted the costs and risks. Third Army's rapid movement had been accompanied by significant vehicle losses due to weather-related mechanical failures. Units arrived at Bastogne exhausted from continuous operations under extreme conditions. The fighting to open and maintain the corridor to Bastogne continued to inflict casualties. Eisenhower's strategic perspective encompassed not just immediate tactical success, but sustainable operational capability for campaigns that would continue for months. Eisenhower's most telling comments came in his post-war memoir, Crusade in Europe. Writing with benefit of hindsight and access to complete operational records, he assessed Patton's Bulge operations. George Patton's ability to turn his army to face a new threat so rapidly was one of the outstanding achievements of the war. It demonstrated not only his own aggressive instincts, but the organizational competence of his staff and the training and discipline of his soldiers. This assessment captured what military historians have concluded about the 90-degree turn. It wasn't just Patton's personality that made it possible. It was systematic staff work, well-trained units, effective logistics management, and soldiers who could execute complex operations under impossible conditions. Patton's genius was recognizing what was possible and having confidence his organization could execute it. The relationship between Eisenhower and Patton during this period illustrated their complementary strengths and fundamental differences. Eisenhower operated at strategic level, balancing multiple competing priorities across entire theater. He had to manage coalition politics, resource allocation, and long-term strategic planning. His decisions affected millions of soldiers and the entire course of the war. Patton operated at operational level, focused on his army's immediate mission and tactical execution. He could concentrate entirely on destroying enemy forces in front of him without having to consider broader political or strategic implications. His strength was translating strategic objectives into operational reality through aggressive, relentless execution. Eisenhower needed commanders like Patton who could execute difficult operations without excessive caution or delay. Patton needed commanders like Eisenhower who could provide strategic direction and protect him from political consequences of his controversial personality. Their relationship, despite tensions and disagreements, was ultimately effective because each understood what the other brought to Allied command structure. The 90-degree turn through the blizzard became one of the defining moments of both commanders' careers. For Patton, it was vindication of his tactical philosophy and proof that aggressive action produced results methodical caution could not match. For Eisenhower, it was validation of his judgment in keeping Patton in command, despite controversies, and his willingness to accept risk when strategic situation demanded bold action. When Germany surrendered on May 7, 1945, Patton's Third Army stood deep in Czechoslovakia, having advanced over 600 miles from Normandy. Their rapid response during the Bulge had been critical to defeating Germany's last major offensive and accelerating the final collapse of German resistance. Eisenhower's assessment in his final report to combined chiefs of staff acknowledged this contribution explicitly. Third Army's operations from Normandy through final victory demonstrated consistently high level of aggressive leadership and tactical competence. What Eisenhower said about Patton's 90-degree turn ultimately mattered less than what it represented. American forces had developed capability for rapid, decisive response to crisis that matched or exceeded anything achieved by any army in modern warfare. That capability, forged through 2 years of combat and exemplified by the impossible maneuver through the blizzard, helped end the war in Europe.